Good morning. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming and being early birds to the second edition of the Constructing Practice Symposium. I want to thank first Stefan Bodecker, crew, and Laila Catelier for all their help to make this possible. It's really a complicated conference to organize. But it's crucial, I think, in these times to make this question about the practice. The question about the practice comes as a necessary effort to blur boundaries between speculation and reality, between education and professional perform, between open mind of the academia and the constraints and limitations of the outside world. The first edition of this symposium was in fall 2017, was focused on the transition between local and global education to global and local practice. So the idea at that moment in the statement of the conference was that the establishing of the own practice can be, should be, a project in itself, an act of design. Our guests at that time explored many times, but in many occasions by first time in their professional life, their transition, their processes from the formative years to the establishing of their practices. So the question was the invention or the selection of the methods of working of emerging practices is an act of design or is driven by the context, no? Or we could say how many decisions in the establishing of the practice were conscious intentions, or how many of them came from the different contexts without questioning them. So we follow in this second edition with this idea of how to transform the establishing of the practice in a conscious series of decisions. Retrospectively, we can say that that session was about the practice of the practice. For this second edition, this is beautiful, we want to enrich that approach, focusing on the need to build a critical position as designers in the establishing of the practice. So this is not only a question of method of design or method of work, but also about the selection of the engagement from which to explore the present. That's the reason of renaming the conference as Constructing Engaged Practice. And perhaps we'll change the adjective in future editions as the architectural practice receives new inquiries from the outside. We have selected 4 ingredients, we could say 4 engagements, shaping the present that need a new consideration as materials of the project. And we have also selected 12 firms that are already doing it. Sustainability, technology, politics, and theory will be the 4 panels of the symposium today. They have been in the last decades very present in the architectural discourses and an object of interest, speculation, fascination, prevention, of even rejection. We could say that they came to the discipline, perhaps in the generation before you, no, as external topics, as something, a collection of references initially peripheral to architectural practice, brought to the project as ingredients to be taken or not. But today, we can't consider these topics like that because we know that it's impossible to consider them as problems of the others. And they are part of the forefront of our contemporary panorama, replete with their overflowing dimensions and important contradictions. And we, as architects, but also as citizens, inhabit the center of that panorama, not the privileged periphery. The 12 practices today, like in the first edition, have been established in the last 10 years and will present their tactics, the tactics that they use to negotiate these conflicts and the contradictory climate that shape our profession, and how they respond as designers to expand the field and definition of architecture. There are 3 guidelines that I hope will be visible along the day. The first is design is the main tool of architecture. We could say we are designers. We are not any other thing. Design is relevant when it transforms critical approaches. We could say that we contribute to the physical construction of the world, but also to the intellectual realm of our society. And third, design must engage with a wide range of disciplines and varying agendas. Dialogue with others is one of our crucial tools of making decisions in the design process. The rituals. The rituals are simple. The 12 firms will perform in 4 panels. Each participant has 20 minutes to deliver a short presentation to explain their respective contexts, experiences, strategies, engagements, ambitions, and influences relevant to their founding years. After the presentation, we will have a moderator opening a dialogue with the participants, and of course, you are kindly invited to make your questions and participate in these conversations. I want to go directly to the first panel. It's sustainability, and it's subtitled as From Environmental Awareness to Design. So in all the panels, there is a subtitle, and the subtitle is referred to how this topic came to architectural world and how we think that should be incorporated or is being incorporated by you to the project or to the design process. Some emerging practices are approaching environmental awareness as a crucial argument of their work. All we are convinced that we need new concepts of naturalness and the ways in which it can embody architecture. The ingredients of an already here future and their overwhelming figures, climate change, new urban and global mobilities, material reuse and recycling, migrations, environmental justice, etc., reclaim both an intellectual reconfiguration of our engagement with the environment and a fight for a real viability of our global project. We have 3 practices for this first panel. All of the practices today have been intensely awarded, published, and exhibited, and many of them are involved in teaching, so I'm not going to give these details to you. You have the beautiful brochure to find them. So I only want to give a short reason to be invited, so you know why you have been invited. So, Arrow Frick. Johan Arrow and Henrik Frick established Arrow Frick in 2010 in Stockholm, Sweden. Carlos Nieto became a partner in 2017. Their ambition is to develop clear proposals based on a deep understanding of the specific social and economical context. Many of their projects consist in flexible infrastructures capable of future interactions and changes of programs encouraging sustainability and longevity in the building industry. Studio Max. Mark Coombs founded Studio Max in Rotterdam in 2010. The work of Studio Max offers a distinctive all-scale blurring of boundaries between natural and artificial domains, between pragmatism and freedom. Her academic research group, Future Urban Regions, explores the reformulation of the existing city with a special focus in the topics of this symposium today, such as eco-environment and social and economic equations. Tropical Space. Nguyen Hai Long and Tran Thi Nguyen founded Tropical Space in Ho Chi Minh City in 2011. As most of our participants today, they work in all scales. Their practice is a significant example of global thinking and local performance focused in a deep understanding of the Vietnamese culture and climate, committed to the use of environmentally friendly building practices and sustainable material selection. Nguyen Hai Long will be helped in the stage by Li Thi Nguyen, who will translate his presentation. The moderator of this first panel will be David Benjamin. Thank you, David, for being here and helping this conference. David is founding principal of The Living and professor at Columbia GISEP. His work combines research and practice focused on the intersection of biology, computation, and design. Benjamin has articulated 3 frameworks of harnessing living organisms for architecture: bioprocessing, biosending, and biomanufacturing. So please let me call to a stage Arrow Frick.
Hello. Thank you very much for this invitation. And it's a really interesting thing you're doing. I just must say that. Well, my name is Johan Arov, and in sitting position tonight is Henrik Frick. And we, as an office, we don't have any really clear strategy or idea or a master plan. About how to deal with architecture or responsible solutions. We've always been worked quite hands-on basic problem solving, I would say, kind of common sense in terms of how to deal with responsible solutions. We've always worked quite analog at office, also a lot by drawings by hand, also writing a bit notes. And these notes for us they're quite important. They have become like, I don't know, themes or something for our internal process, helping us defining questions or ambitions. So for this occasion, we have gathered some notes, some drawings, photos, almost like a cut from our daily work that might constitute ideas or ambitions from our side about sustainability. I will actually start with the 2 last years in school. We did them together. We had a Professor Anna Bettencourt that was really special for us, and special in Stockholm at that time because it was quite conservative. She was quite radical. We didn't draw any buildings. We were only analyzing different parts of society, political aspects, economical systems, and environmental issues. Sometimes we did small inventions to adapt theory into practice, like this small device creating light from movement, energy, for instance. We often started with a component and adapted them to where it was really needed. I mean, that was kind of the core to this idea, like adding light to dark places, for instance. All those investigations were tested as case studies, like here, for instance. We took this picture because it's from this city. We spent some time here at that time abandoned High Line, and we were thinking about how to activate this place completely from the existing conditions. So everything was developed through what was already there, kind of heat emissions, prevailing winds, collecting and cleaning rainwaters. And I mean, these 2 years in school, it was important to mention. It was really hard. It was like entering a black hole because we didn't do anything specific. It was no beginning nor end. But anyway, this kind of thinking is important for us still and central in a process to be able to figure out what is working or not and how situations could be improved for real, to understand the conditions of every project. So this might be why we think of our work as, I mean, it's not very complicated and it's very basic problem solving. But if you really understand a problem based on a condition, you have a solution. We've always been very interested in buildings or structures that you don't really notice. These are some really old photos. Even before architecture school, I have a lot of these, and I've looked at them now recently, and it's always this kind of relationship between building and activity, an open space and what could take place inside, and the central questions about all this is kind of the purpose of architecture, and we discuss it a lot. Do we add something? Do we provide for better qualities? How and why is probably the most common question at the office. And I would say that this might be our first response to how to provide for sustainable design, to always ask those questions. We often start our projects of imagining how a place could be given possibilities to be activated, not following a proposed or fixed program, but rather small ideas about how to improve situations. We always start from the existing. In this case, a park in Dessau, where we did a proposal for a new museum for the Bauhaus collection. At that time, for the competition, the collection was spread out on 3 different places around the city, basically in storages. The aim was to collect all those pieces into one space. And of course, I mean, there were amazing pieces, so basically we thought that the museum was already there, just gathering the pieces into the park. And we added what the collection just needed. It was like a new shed, more or less, protected from the weather conditions, giving the space some natural light and a certain amount of security. And responsibility of economy, I mean, that's kind of key for us. Economy in terms of material, we're doing the most of a budget, I'm doing economy of energy as well. We don't think, or we don't like to design something that everyone should, really fight for to get built or solve. We want to do something kind of the opposite that is simple to put together. This is from our first, or my first study trip in architecture school, actually. We visited France, and it was an amazing trip. We looked at all those, masters and amazing pieces of architecture. But we also looked at this La Tapie house by Lacton Vassal, which was, for me, very, very special and strong experience. And by that time, it was not so much about, this extra space and everything, but it was that I remember it was a lot about components and the structure. It was like perfectly balanced according to its loads. A beam, it was not larger than it needed to be. Nothing except the necessary were present. And up on this hill was the position of a small house we did a few years ago. And here the budget was extremely tight, so we needed to do everything super effective. And the first decision was to do a house that could be made of parts on a factory, transported to the site on one prawn. The second was that the client decided to carry all material himself with a friend from this drop-off area down here. So up here is the site. So it led us to a solution to use this standard glulam timber in manageable sizes and weight in order for the logistics to work. We developed a structural scheme consisting of those parts. All component dimensioned as minimal as possible for the purpose, and it was basically just enough to make the structure stable. The components connected to each other with bolts going through the main beams. The windows divided into parts to be able to carry for one person. And this is how our internal process kind of looks like. It's always about questions about to compare. I mean, why choose one beam or slab or pillar or system in front of another? To kind of figure that out. That is our main thing at the office, I would say. At the moment, we're proposing not only one solution, but several options of how to add 6 free-spanning platforms for cultural building in a small town in Sweden. And we're presenting this project like components both for the client as well for the city, and kind of show them the possibilities, economic pros and cons, installations, and everything. In a house we called Six Walls House, the client had a builder already before we started. He was not the best builder, but not very expensive. And he didn't know very well how to build in wood, which is the thing you do in Sweden. Sweden is made of wood, more or less. But he knew and had experience in building with light concrete blocks. So it became the only option. And we started by looking into catalogs on the material and its qualities. And you could say that basically it's 3 types of blocks, and also one solution for openings, adding a beam. So we used this and started to develop ideas about the most simple geometry you can do, basically, that could not be made wrong, regardless of the builder. So it became this 6 straight walls defining the rooms, as well as becoming the structure of the house. And the inside spaces were almost randomly developed. And the house, the arrangement of the house was a lot about how to achieve, a minimal amount of cutting of the blocks, to use every piece of block that you had, as well as creating as spacious house as possible. A house developed from the block. So we want to learn this profession slowly. We don't rush into things. We like to understand what we are doing and what we are proposing. We want to understand every component that we are proposing. We don't want to be doing things too quick. To handle economy as a sustainable approach, we like to see this a little bit like a craftsmanship. You need to know the basics of planning. We did not learn this in school, which is fair enough, but it's really important. It's not rocket science, but if you don't understand this, it's a bit tricky, I would say, to propose something else. The basic knowledge of where material comes from, the parts that you can get from a tree, for instance, and use every piece of a tree in the best possible way. 25 trees was the title of a small research project we did at the Venice Biennale in 2016, where we investigated methods for achieving the maximum amount of built space using a minimal amount of material. So the result became like a truss-like structure, depending on the stable triangle. And because of this geometry, each element transferred the tensile and compressive loads with no additional needs for stabilization. So it was like a scenario that became a hall of around 2,000 cubic meters, I think, or something like that, out of 25 trees. At the moment, we're working with ideas of the low-budget weekend house. There will be around 10 of them in a forest area around a couple of hours north of Stockholm. And here again, we know everything about this catalog of posts and beams and in wood, so we choose that. Make as large spans as possible. The floor, roof, closed facade, massive timber, for like these old timber cabins, so you don't need another layer of insulation. It's insulated in itself. If you don't have a wall, you need a diagonal beam. The cultural building I mentioned before will be built in this. It's actually a really small town in Sweden, around 10,000 inhabitants. So our client that has this block, he asked us to develop this. And the moment we started, we realized that this project was all about creating a good foundation for a realistic economy. So first we proposed to actually add extra program in order to help each other work. It's a lack of a music school in a larger area around the town, so we proposed to add that in relation to a concert hall. And the city, as well as the concert hall, needs a restaurant and so on. So it's about this kind of co-working sustainable economy. We aim to respect and learn from every specific site, to be as careful with that as the building component and the economy, to be very careful when changing a site. As much as possible, we want to make building not interfering with nature. Like you could one day more or less demount a structure and put the nature back to where it was. The weekend house project we're working on are now made from components assembled with bolts, with as few touching points in the ground as possible. We want to make nature as one of the components, you could say. In the Bauhaus project, it's a light and generic structure placed on top of the park, possible to rearrange and even remove. In the urban fabric, we see some clear problems at the moment in Sweden. This is a picture from Google Street View, and it's a lot of these areas now developing. For instance, the issue of the size of the blocks tends to become bigger and bigger per single developer. So in our opinion, this is a huge problem since it creates a lack of diversity in program, possible activities in the ground floor. They put like a real estate agent in one of the corners, and then it's no relation more between the building and the urban life. So to establish those clear principles of the relation between building and street is really important and something we actually fight for in the processes. This is a competition we did 7 years ago or something that we won, and it's a huge project, 50,000 square meter, or for us at least. It was the major food brand in Sweden, ICA. They wanted to include this huge food hall. So this was the kind of proposal, and we placed it in the center because it required this height. In the outer ring, we were really careful about what to add and how to place this structure in order to split this part up. We also could gain this extra floor here, and instead of digging more in the ground for parking, for housing, we put it up here because this didn't need to have this ceiling height. So it's this kind of small adjustment to kind of, I don't know, gain or save, not save the earth, but yeah, in one way actually. So the result of the ground floor programming with all staircases and structural walls is shown in this sketch. So it kind of forced this large space, the outer ring, to be divided into smaller pieces. So for us it's important to take a clear opinion on how to propose this kind of a relationship between building and street. Sometimes we don't want a building to interfere. This is a competition we did for a tower in Santiago a few years ago. We put this structure just in the main sections of pathways. And the second idea was to elevate the building, creating a roof, adding some benches for the people walking on the hill to rest on. The Bauhaus plan, with the context, the main street to the right, you could load from trucks, you can go into the building with trucks, the main entrance to the north, closed volumes, and the in-between completely open. As the first sketch we made in this building to interact with the park, that could even have programs as well. So the human, but actually especially Swedish mentality is strongly depending on the light. This is an image a few weeks ago, like 3 o'clock or something in the afternoon, and the sun is, I mean, you live in darkness more or less for the winter time. When the spring comes, it's very dramatic. People start to go out, interact with other people, and they move themselves to the light. Our foreign people from the southern parts of Europe, we have some, and at the office they are really struggling. So in our space we find ways to let the light enter in special ways. Maybe make it a little bit stronger with colors. We placed all the species really carefully to make them happy. And this is a really nice project in Sweden from a Swedish architect, Bruno Mattsson. He was operating in the 40s, his own summer house, and he was really obsessed with this thing of living outside. He even made his own device for sleeping outside. He had this sun gardens. Sequence through the building, through the inside, and this roof with plastic roof letting the light inside. Even the bathroom had natural light. The terrace at the small house at Vigse facing northwest, so it never gets too warm, but the light is very special. In the summer period, the glass doors in the 6 Walls house are open and the light is really present, the evening sun reflecting in the lake. Inside as outside, you're among the shifts from cloudy days to clear days. Hammarby Gård is a rather central spot in Stockholm. It was our kind of first project, or larger project, that we were trying to learn the mechanism of housing industry. The contour was fixed. We maximized everything. The balconies. One idea was to make every apartment double-sided. Also quite small thing. We added 3 different window types. Horizontal division to the street up that you could open, like recessed balconies. Double doors in the lower part, and also clear glass on the outside of the balcony. So the horizontal divided windows towards the street makes the whole facade like recessed balconies. The garden side with the glass facade. So we often like to go back in time regarding how building functions. You can learn a lot about looking at this. We like to make buildings as independent as possible. In the cultural building, we're now presenting possible direction how to use the building in the simplest way. We want to achieve natural light, high-performance curtains for sound protection, solar roofs, natural ventilations where it's possible. Also, here ideas to involve the user, the people taking care of the building. We also noticed that programs are changing more, even in housing. So this is not model of one project, this is different projects. We don't feel a need to invent. We prefer to reuse, even ourselves in our office. So we have this database of our old projects regarding structure, what worked, what didn't work so well. Same as rooms, proportions, windows. We don't aim for one solution or in complete projects. We're interested in open structures with multiple options to rearrange. Now we're changing a project from 50 to 80 units, but the structure is already built. The plan of the tower in Santiago. The weekend out systems that can be open or closed. This is a common scenario how we present competition proposal. This is for the ICA, where it was completely open-ended for future development. At the moment, we're working with a couple of projects without a program as a proposal from us. I mean, who knows what the future will be for those kind of large-scale developments. So we reuse and modify the systems a lot, just making sure that the qualities of light is good, the noise, then often present the possibilities of the system open for discussion. So I'm just about to finish now. To let the people and their own way of living create the building or places themselves is central. Not an idea from our side, but from a human perspective. There are some really good examples of this. We find always those kind of direct and realized projects very interesting. This is a project from Sweden, where they did 3 platforms in concrete, 80 meters long, and just divided them into plots. And the ambition in Santiago, even stated in the brief, was to make a landmark. The height was required by the antennas. We proposed a skeleton large enough for the ASK program, but larger than needed for the antennas to create a flexible vertical space for future development, like vertical platforms. So it was not a fixed proposal, a foundation for future development, rather. So in this small town where the cultural building, we are using exactly the same ideas. The client asked us to insert the cultural program in the existing buildings, but we propose to keep them and make a new one in the center. So the ambition are completely open platforms, 20 by 30 meters, that will be developed by the city and the people. So perhaps this is our idea about sustainability: the constructive components, the open-ended, economic responsibility, natural light, the present nature, and the people making it possible. Thank you.
Like Johan said already, it's amazing, this conference. I wish I had it when I was in university. My name is Marieke, and Studio Max is my office. And there's a lot of people helping to create projects. It's not just me. I've been asked to talk a bit about sustainability, and actually our office is not so known for sustainability, but we are very much involved in creating designs that are very much, that have great awareness of the environment. So maybe I would like to talk today about natural design, which kind of is in your sub-description, I guess. So I'm cheating a little bit. I'm going to also explain a little bit how I came to have the office as it is. Like also Johan was saying, it was not a very conscious act. Things happened over time. I studied mainly in the TU Delft, which kind of looks like this. It's kind of brutalist buildings. It's not very subtle. It's both buildings. The one on the left is the major auditorium, and the one on the right is the Faculty of Architecture. And they were both made by Broek and Bakema, which are very famous post-war architects in the Netherlands. And when I was in architecture school, it was very much kind of super Dutch generation. So all this kind of iconic buildings. It was very much about, and still a lot of Dutch architecture is about very powerful concepts and recognizable shapes. When we had studios in university, our studios were only 8 weeks. We had 5 8-week studios a year. And it also trained us to have a very strong story and a strong idea, but we never really had the time to go into more detail and to really develop the experience of the space or the materialization in a lot of detail. And a lot of students actually were really kind of struggling with that. So it was really great in TU Delft to get a lot of opportunities to study abroad. So I went a bit to Norway. Of course, they have really amazing architects there. And I fell in love with a lot of the work of Sverre Fein, and this is still one of my favorite buildings of him. It's the Nordic Pavilion in Venice, actually. And not in Norway, but still very beautiful. So I actually went a little bit on a search during my student times. I actually also got the opportunity to study half a year at MIT and Harvard. And there I had really brilliant tutors, especially 2 theory professors. One on the left, and Winston Spurn is a landscape designer, and Yves Blau is an architectural theory person. And Anne taught us a lot about how to experience the landscape, but also to be aware of the environmental influences of the weather, etc. And Yves Blau talked, I followed a class about transparency in architecture and how to create continuous space, or space that is changing, and she had really wonderful stories about it. So it really kind of freed architecture a little bit for me. Another amazing thing about Holland has all these kind of subsidies, which is, and scholarships also a lot. I got a scholarship to travel around the world. I could visit 10 cities in each 10 days to study global architecture, and somehow I also ended up in Tokyo, and I really fell in love with it. I think many people have. And what was really amazing for me, that such an amazingly big city could still feel so extremely relaxed. And it's very much a city of objects in which buildings and people and nature, not in all the places, but in some places, found a very equal existence. And this became a very important theme, actually, in my work. This is a shawl out of India, and it's a kind of a projection of a city in Kashmir. And it's from the 1500s, so it's very old. But here you also see that the houses, water, animals, people, everybody is kind of in a kind of a balanced situation, and they all benefit from each other, and they're all kind of equal. And there's not a very strong hierarchy, and not very strong concepts ruling the rest of it. Kind of zoom in Tokyo Fabric, and this amazing project of Moriyama House, which for me became very important piece to understand space, because I learned very much that space is very much like an interior thing. I think Northern European countries, maybe it is because of the weather, but I feel also if you look at the image on the left or the image of the right, where the activities of people take place, whether they're inside or outside, for me it's kind of a equal space, and to connect in and outdoor spaces and to unite them and to create a continuous kind of programmatic fabric is a very interesting point in architecture. I started working for Sana for a couple of years, and these guys are really amazing, and they're really also, I think, the best that I learned from them, which is also very important in architecture, is to have fun and to create interesting things, and not see it as a merely like problem-solving discipline, but to create opportunity in what you do, and do it with as a collaborative act. This is their office. The first project I worked on there, I will not talk a lot about the time there, but was also very interesting for me, actually quite shocking. We had to create a space for an event in Benesse Art Site. That's a kind of a group of islands in the middle of Japan. And actually we didn't really make a space as you're used to making space with a roof and walls. It was so lightly created, and it was so intuitive how to use it. It was so non-descriptive that I was amazed that the space could be as light as this. And it really opens up a lot of opportunity to create things. There's another person that for me was very interesting to learn from, which is Toyo Ito, and the way he creates designs. And I think his way of making things is really a reaction against modernism with the kind of the more regular grids. His way also of connecting to the environment and to nature is deforming this kind of regular grid and trying to make it open up to the environment, and therefore distorting it, which gives all kinds of specificities to places inside buildings. There's never one space the same. And he has also this nice thing to say about the way he designs. He says, he calls it generative order. As a tree assumes its form depending on its variety, and by repeating very simple rules, the tree creates a very complex order, but also a very natural order. A tree also decides its own specific form and growth, and a tree decides its shape in response to its surroundings. So it's not a thing on itself, it's something that responds to the surroundings. It's always open to the environment, and when you're under the tree, you don't know if you're in or outside. This is my school, and when I was trying to learn all these new things, and it was maybe a symbolic act that like my past was kind of burned behind me. It was actually very sad. They made this design and they put a big moat around it for water, that in case the building would ever catch fire, the water would be right at hand. But because the moat was there, actually none of the fire trucks could come close enough to the building to actually extinguish the fire. So it burned down very easily. It was very sad. It was 1 week before the final presentation, so a lot of students lost the entire year of work. But it also teaches about very rational buildings that might not be there to last if they're too kind of restricted in their design. After working many years for Sana, I actually worked only on projects outside of Japan. So I had the opportunity to travel to a lot of places in the world, and I did projects in Dubai, in Hong Kong, in Mexico, in Europe, and in other places in Asia, which is really interesting to understand the different contexts in which you work. They really very much determine for me how the project is developed. At some point I decided to go back to Holland. I did want to start my own office. I didn't know exactly how, but I did think that if I want to create good work, I should do it in a place where I have most opportunity to do so. And I thought that would be the place that I called home, for many practical reasons also. This is my office now. We just moved actually, so it looks very organized and clean. We are there for now 1 week. We work with between 5 and 10 people. When I started the office, let's see how much time, yeah. When I started the office, I received a talent scholarship from the Dutch government. So I could be free of financial worries for the first year, which was amazing, because then you can actually do projects and not worry too much about the financial side of it, and try to also explore what you really want to do. I don't know, I think a lot of, some have the lucky chance, or they manage to start their own office right out of university, and a lot of us also work for other offices before they start their own thing, and it's, for me, it was quite a challenge to find your own voice after working for other people for several years, and this scholarship made it possible to do so. I'm just going to talk about 3 projects to explain you a little bit how we work, and they're the kind of more 3 recent projects. And this is the one that we completed last year. It's a visitor center in Park Vijversburg. And it's also interesting how you actually get projects for your office. In the beginning, you're very eager and you want to kind of take everything, and at some point you become much more specific. But a lot of the nice projects, you don't just, like in the Netherlands, there's almost no open competitions. You have to participate, you have to apply with your portfolio, but if you didn't have your own work, you cannot really apply for projects. So a lot of the younger offices, they start to collaborate with people that they know. So I actually invited Junior Ishigami. I just came back from Japan when there was this competition, and we started the competition together because I had some points and he had some points, and together we could do this work. We actually, unfortunately, didn't continue our collaboration, but we did manage to finish the project really nicely. It's a big project in a big park in the north of Holland. This is the historical park. And when we were invited for the competition, they also invited an artist and a landscape architect to expand the park. So there were 3 competitions at the same time. And we were asked to do a new visitor center. This is actually a park from 1700s. It's a few hundred years old, and this was the historical mansion. And then we were also asked to renovate the glass houses, to make an open-air stage, and to renovate the main house. So there were a lot of little projects all together. We really wanted to try to make a very subtle intervention. This park is actually a national monument, as is the house, so you're almost not allowed to do anything. And it needed to be placed here, but it also needed to be connected to the main house. So they had a lot of requirements. So we said, okay, we want to respect the environment, we want to respect the existing landscape. So we pull 3 lines along the main elements, and then we try to situate the visitor center in between, and it becomes almost like a little animal. Like every time we found out there's like a tree there, okay, and then, okay, we move the building a bit. So it's kind of dancing until it became kind of a final form. It's also, we really respect always the budget of clients. Sometimes we get comments that we make a bit crazy designs, but we always make them very carefully. And also this building form, it's kind of decided also by optimizing the shape of the panels, the number of building products, and to standardize as much as possible so it fits in the budget. And in the end, we managed to make it fit in the budget. This is a model. We work really a lot with physical models. Also to communicate with our clients. And this is the building. So this is the historical house, and this is the pavilion. When we were talking to our client and presenting it in the competition in which we won, we still had some columns in the building. But when the monumental committee, we had to present to them and say, like, this is really, we can build something like this in a historical park. And they said, okay, you are only allowed to do it, you can only get the building permit if your building becomes as transparent as possible and it doesn't become this really fat, ugly green glass building. So we spend a lot of time in optimizing the transparency of the building, and even kicking out the columns and making the glass the actual structural component of the building. So in the center there's an auditorium where 100 people can sit, but basically if you enter the visitor center, you're kind of redirected to parts of the park. This building has to do, like in the Netherlands, it's not really a question if you were making a sustainable building. The sustainability requirements are so high, almost the building have to be energy neutral, that you have to be very inventive if you want to make a fully glazed building. So here also you see here slits along the ceiling. This has a tropical roof, so the air can naturally ventilate through the roof. There are shutters there, and it goes out through the gutters of the roof. The glass is made from with a high insulation value. We have little, you almost don't see, but little magnets in the ceiling that you can hang curtains as sunscreens in case necessary. And in this way, we managed to complete that building and try to make a building that when you are in the park, you actually feel also you're outside. A second project I want to explain is not realized yet. We're working on it now. We just received a building permit and they start construction next year. It's a housing project in Amsterdam, and it's actually done with a project developer. It started by MVRDV that organized a competition for young architects to give them a chance to do bigger projects, which is very nice. They're a little bit becoming the mamas and papas of the younger generation. We won a housing block here, and there are 40 apartments inside, and it was quite nice. The developer, they just want to make money, so as long as you have a really great plan, they're happy with it. So we were allowed to define their own user group, the number of apartments, etc. And we said it's really difficult for young families to stay in Amsterdam. The housing prices are getting really high. It's around 10,000 euro per square meter. So let's say you buy an apartment for 50 square meters, it's 500,000 euros, and it's a lot of people don't have that money. So we said, okay, we tried to give a very compact family house with 2 stories and a garden and stack them. So the family, they have a really good condition of living in the city, and it's still affordable. And they feel like they're living outside. In the Netherlands, the ultimate family home is the home with the garden in the green. So we have these super compact apartments here. They're all surrounded by these large balconies. Some have 40 square meters of outdoor space, and their own home is only 70 square meters. So these zones around the houses, they become this kind of buffer between the city and the house, between the very public space and the very private one. But they also help for sun shading, they help as a sound buffer, and because they can put a lot of big plants there, they can also create like a microclimate and for birds and little bugs to exist in the city. There's a lot of research for this in the Netherlands. Inside the house, we also developed a new housing typology, which has very compact walls with toilets and kitchen and everything in it. So you can create kind of open spaces and use the square meters very, very efficiently. And this is the ground floor of the house, and then these are the upper floors of the family apartments. And then you can even have like a little study, maybe a kid's bedroom, right? It becomes all very alternative living. Another competition we won, actually, we win most of the projects we have, we got them through doing competitions. This is an open competition with it in Austria. That's another interesting thing in Europe. You can easily do projects in other countries as long as you speak the language a bit. It's a visitor center for a new university just outside of Vienna, and it's specialized in sciences, biosciences, natural sciences, and they wanted to have a visitor center to receive guests, but also to explain what science can make possible. We created a little floating cloud in the park. This is a very monumental site again, and we wanted the visitors that arrive here that they are still feeling the beauty and the outdoor space of the park and not go directly into an enclosed space. We designed a round volume that is integrated very much in the park and can be approached from all sides, with a big staircase going downstairs, and there's like a really big exhibition spaces underground. We're then testing a lot how to create this project by optimizing the structure, because also here is a very tight budget, optimizing how we can produce the structure, how the light works, what kind of effects it can create, and what optimization of the structure means for the interior experience. And we make one-to-one mock-ups in our office of parts of the building to see if it really works as we want it to work. I'm just closing off a little bit. I think there's many ways to make architecture. I think for me it's very important that it's very rooted into its context and linked to the people that use it, but that it also creates a certain freedom and that it inspires people. But there's also this relation between the technology and the society and the forces of nature, and this all plays a foundational role in our design process. We use our work to explore the cognitive possibilities of architecture and how the built work can impact the way in which we know ourselves and which we know the environment. So architecture becomes a tool to understand the world and also to improve its situation. Thank you.
Xin chào, chúng tôi Tropical Space đến từ thành phố Hồ Chí Minh, Việt Nam.
Thank you for having us today. We are Tropical Space from Vietnam.
Đây là hình ảnh về văn phòng của chúng tôi.
So we founded in 2011, and this is our studio where we work and welcome friends visiting.
Mà chúng tôi chia sẻ một số công việc chúng tôi làm với các bạn.
And thank you for having us today, and we would like to introduce you about the context basically in Vietnam and what we and our practice there, and I hope that it could, and I hope. And I hope that it could help to introduce you about Vietnam architecture and the context that we are working there.
Thành phố Việt Nam là một thành phố, một đất nước đang phát triển. Dân số tập trung về các thành phố lớn. Thành phố Hồ Chí Minh cũng là một cái thành phố mà dân số 9 triệu người, kéo theo cái sự nóng và chật ở trong đô thị.
So Vietnam is a developing country, and the population tend to live in the city. So we live in Ho Chi Minh City, which has population about 9 million, so it's the same size with New York now maybe. And as a result, the expansion of the city led to the cramp and the accumulated heat and the stuffy condition there.
Đi sâu vào những cái con phố nhỏ của thành phố Hồ Chí Minh, thì đây là những cái hẻm nhỏ với những cái ngôi nhà kích thước đặc trưng là 30 mét cho khoảng 4 người trở lên.
If you explore deeply into the city, you can find a lot of small corner and alley. So where the house for four people usually have the area under 30 meters square.
Mọi người cảm thấy không thoải mái với không gian ở của mình, nhưng mà không hiểu lý do tại sao.
People mostly very uncomfortable with the house, but they don't know why.
Tiếp tục là ở ngoài đường thì buổi sáng khi đi làm và khi trở về nơi ở thì tình trạng kẹt xe cũng xảy ra thường xuyên.
So as the increasing in population, we have a serious problem in traffic. So we're dealing with traffic jam every day. From the morning you go to work and go back home from work.
Chúng tôi muốn tạo một không gian để cân bằng với lại những cái bối cảnh đô thị, tạo cho người dân một cái không gian sống thoải mái, có sự chia sẻ với các thành viên trong gia đình, cũng như là tìm cái sự tự tin ở trong cái sự đơn giản.
So as architect, we think what we should do to deal with the issue that we are facing with the environment, the polluted environment in Ho Chi Minh City, as well as the context of where the people live in. So we want to create a house that could make people feel comfortable, make them solve the problem that they're facing when they come to a house, and they find the confidence when they choosing the material, when they choosing the form of architecture, and also being much more confidence in the simpleness that they could have in the house.
Chúng tôi nghĩ rằng chúng tôi phải làm gì đó, mà chúng tôi chọn vật liệu là cái việc khởi đầu. Chúng tôi chọn một viên gạch và tiếp theo là nhiều viên gạch để tạo ra một không gian ở.
So we think about the material, and we choose a unit of brick, and we continue with many bricks to create the building.
Gạch là cái vật liệu có ở khắp nơi ở Việt Nam, dễ mua, dễ kiếm, và hầu hết các công trình ở Việt Nam đều sử dụng gạch, nhưng thường chúng ẩn sâu vào trong bởi những cái lớp vật liệu hoàn thiện khác nhau.
The brick is the most common material in Vietnam, which is common, available, and not expensive. And most of the building in Vietnam are built with brick, but they usually being hidden by different finish layers.
Đây là những công trình của chúng tôi làm. Chúng tôi
And this is the project that we've done in our practice. And different projects, they have different contexts in different region of Vietnam, and they're dealing with different issues. So I hope that with introduce some of our project could introduce you about the context in Vietnam and what we're doing at our office.
Chúng tôi xin giới thiệu một cái ngôi nhà nhỏ nằm trong con phố hẻm nhỏ và phố nhỏ, một cái đặc trưng của khu quận 6 của Việt Nam.
So this small house is in a small alley, a small neighbor of Ho Chi Minh City, and this is very typical area that most of people are living.
Thường là tất cả mọi các hoạt động của người dân được người ta mang ra ngoài cái con đường nhỏ để sinh hoạt. Người ta có những cái thao tác trò chuyện, xong rồi diễn ra các hoạt động trong gia đình. Bởi vì là ngôi nhà nó quá nhỏ và nóng.
Here people opt to bring their daily activity out of the home because inside is very narrow and hot, so they tend to be out of the house, communicate and do some of the work.
Chúng tôi muốn tạo ra một cái nơi ở để có một cái sự chuyển tiếp từ không gian trong và ngoài công trình, và những cái hoạt động của mọi người có thể đưa vào nhà nhưng mà vẫn giữ được cái thói quen tương tác giữa các thành viên của cái khu phố.
So we want to help the inhabitant remain the habit, but also bring the activity inside the house, but still help them to interact with the neighbor as their habit. So we use the light material outside, so they can bring wider feelings to the alley.
Ngôi nhà quá nhỏ để có thể sắp xếp tất cả các chức năng ở trong ngôi nhà, nên chúng tôi chọn cầu thang cho ngôi nhà nhỏ này, nó là cái không gian chia sẻ.
So the size of the house is 3.4 meter wide and 7 meter long. So the area is very small to accommodate for 2 people. So we try to utilize the stair to create the sharing area so that we can put more function in this space.
Mọi người có thể ngoài chức năng đi lại thì người ta có thể ngồi đọc sách, ngồi chơi trong một số cây, và cái cầu thang là cái nơi thông gió cho ngôi nhà và lấy sáng cho không gian chung của ngôi nhà.
So we come with the stair. We help them to have a space that they can reading book. They can define which kind of space that it is to use that they want. But the staircase is also the place that we get the sunlight direct from the void in the roof of the house. It's also our ventilation solution for the house.
Chúng tôi muốn giới thiệu một cái dự án tiếp theo của chúng tôi. Nó nằm ở khu vực miền Trung của Việt Nam, nơi mà có nhiều nắng và những cơn bão nhiệt đới.
So we move into the middle of Vietnam. So Vietnam, we have long countries in the middle. The weather is different rather than the south of Vietnam, and this how we call it termitory. How we been by the termites.
Thường vào mùa nóng, khu vực miền Trung người ta có nhiều cách tránh nóng, người ta ra biển tìm những cái vị trí công viên, nơi chân cầu, hoặc tìm những bóng mát hoặc cái bóng đổ của chính ngôi nhà ở phía ngoài và không ở trong nhà bởi vì trời nóng.
So the weather in this area is very extreme. In the summer, it's very hot. So people, they usually find some solution to escape from the heat. Sometimes they go to the beach. Sometimes they just hide in some space with air conditioner. But sometimes they use their own house shadow. So instead of stay inside the house, they go outside, find the shadow of the house, and spend their time.
Chúng tôi tự hỏi rằng nếu một công trình mà nó xốp rỗng như một miếng xe mướp thì điều gì sẽ xảy ra?
So we think about creating a house that could be porous like this loofah. So how it could be?
Chúng tôi tạo ra một ngôi nhà có những cái lớp tường nằm phía nam và bắc xốp rỗng để gió có thể đi xuyên suốt từ trước ra sau ngôi nhà.
So we create a house with the north and the south walls. We create the porous wall so the wind can go through the house.
Bên cạnh đó là hai hướng đông và tây của ngôi nhà, chúng tôi tạo ra những cái vùng đệm và những chức năng phụ như là kho, cầu thang, vệ sinh, bếp, để cho ngôi nhà vững chắc và hạn chế được cái sức nóng từ hướng tây và hướng đông.
So in the east and west side, we allocate the sub-function space like the toilet, stairs, storage, and kitchen. So in the both sides, they will create a buffer layer to decrease the heat on direct into the center of the house, but also keep the house be more steady in the storm.
Vào những mùa lạnh thì chúng tôi có sử dụng một cái lớp cửa đệm phía trước hướng bắc và hướng nam để linh hoạt đóng mở.
And in the front and the back, where we have the porous wall, we have another the glass slide door, so they can flexibly use in the rainy season.
Chúng tôi muốn tạo một không gian hướng tâm và trung tâm ngôi nhà, nó giống như là một cái hang, và ánh sáng tham gia vào cái việc ngăn chia không gian và khơi gợi những cảm xúc về vật liệu.
So in the center of the house, we have a large common space where we have the kitchen, the dining table, and other spaces. We want to use the sunlight at the main material here, so they can define and separate different functional space in the house. We can have more emotion on the surface of the materials, and we can have the feeling like in the cave that the sunbeam go in.
Đây là những cái không gian mà rút gió cho công trình.
And this space we create, this is the buffer layers that could bring the breeze go into, and will create the flow to all corners in the house.
Chúng tôi muốn tạo ra một ngôi nhà nó có khả năng là tự thở, tự điều hòa và cân bằng với môi trường.
And we want to create a house that could be self-breathing, to be balanced by themselves among the climates.
Chúng tôi xin giới thiệu một cái dự án tiếp theo của chúng tôi về sự tương tác với môi trường. Chúng tôi muốn tạo ra một công trình, cái khối đế là những chức năng sân vườn, gara.
So in the same in the same city, but they have different contexts. And with this house, we want to create a house that they have two functions. In the ground is the cafe, and in the upper floor is the house for the family.
Tầng trên là ba cái khối cho chức năng ở được sắp cạnh nhau. Chúng tôi muốn gợi ra cái cảm giác là nó như ba cái khối đá đặt cạnh nhau để tạo ra những cái khoảng trống ở giữa các khối đó.
So with this project on the upper floor, we have 3 blocks of functional space. So you can think this 3 blocks like a 3 big rock, and then they put to each other, and then they will create a gap between those.
Việc tạo ra khoảng trống giữa các khối nhà, chúng tôi muốn tạo ra một cái sự chuyển tiếp là không gian trong và ngoài đang xen với nhau, nơi có bóng đổ và tốc độ gió có thể thay đổi.
So with this gap, we consider as like a buffer area, and they will interleaving the inside and the outside of the house. So the wind can go. They also create the shadow, so they can cool in on the space so the house is cooling itself by its own shadow.
Chúng tôi muốn mọi người tương tác giữa trong và ngoài để có những cái góc nhìn cũng như cảm nhận về ánh sáng trong các thời điểm khác ở trong ngày.
So with the house, we also create different view for the people who live in, and between those gaps, it create different vision for the people who look out from the inside and outside the house. It also help people to feel the change in the time of the house by the movement of the sunlight. And these are some picture of the project.
Chúng tôi muốn giới thiệu một cái dự án. Dự án này nó nằm ở cái vùng nông thôn miền Nam Việt Nam.
So we move back to the south of Vietnam. So this project is located in the countryside in the south.
Ngôi nhà nằm ở vùng miền quê, và đây cho hai người lớn tuổi về hưu. Họ có mong muốn rằng về đây và hàng tuần và cuối tháng là muốn các con cháu sum vầy về nơi này.
So this house is actually for a couple that they just retired a couple years ago. So they want to move the house from the city back to the countryside, but also create a place that in the weekend that the children and the grandchild can go and visit them.
Chúng tôi lấy cảm hứng từ ngôi nhà truyền thống và chúng tôi tách ra thành hai nửa nhà. Ở trung tâm là một cái khoảng trống lớn và có một cái mặt nước.
So this house, we get the inspiration from a Vietnam traditional house with the big roof. And for the project, we stretch and separate the roof, create a courtyard in the center of the house, and they have a small pond with the water.
Nơi đây là cái hơi nước bốc lên và gió sẽ dẫn nó đi tất cả các không gian ở trong nhà, làm cho ngôi nhà được mát hơn.
So with this space, when the wind go into the house and go past the surface of the water, so the breeze actually can go through the house, and the breeze will be cooling itself already. So it will keep the house being easy, being cool in the summer. And maybe because in this area, the thing we're dealing is much more about the heat in the summer. It is the main, like the majority time of the year would be very, very hot.
Chúng tôi sử dụng những cái khoảng đệm lớn mái hiên phía trước và phía sau nhà, và sử dụng gạch lát xanh để có nước có thể thẩm thấu được, để tạo ra vùng che nắng và làm mát cho cái phần trước sân.
So in the front and the back of the house, we create a big veranda. So they will be making to create the shadow for the place. And the front and the backyard, we use the whole brick and put it vertical. And so the water, when they have the rain, the water can keep there and then cool in the floor of the yard.
Chúng tôi sắp xếp các không gian chức năng trong nhà trải dài từ trước ra sau.
The functional of the house, the functional space of the house was located alongside of the land of the house.
Các không gian được ngăn chia bằng ánh sáng và các khoảng trống.
And those functional area was separated by the gap of the house and also the sunbeam.
Điều này làm cho gió có thể đi vào tất cả các ngóc ngách của ngôi nhà.
So with those gap and the porous wall that allow the breeze go deep into the house.
Mỗi không gian khác nhau, chúng tôi sử dụng ánh sáng để điều tiết cho nó phù hợp với cái chức năng của không gian đó.
So with different purpose of the space, the function that itself, we use different intensity of the sunlight to define the place itself.
Và tiếp theo, để tận dụng những cái lượng thép còn sót lại trong công trình, chúng tôi làm một cái không gian cho con gà, nhà cho gà, để những lũ trẻ có thể có một cái khoảng hiểu được cái quá trình hoạt động của một con vật nuôi.
So after constructing the Long An house, we still have some metal left from the constructing. So we use this to build a chicken house. So this house is actually for a small community of animals, chicken and duck. And so the kids, when they go back to visit the grandparents, they know about the activity of the animal itself that they could be never seen in the city.
Cái nhà cho gà nó là một cái hệ khung lưới mà người ta có thể trồng dây leo lên làm cho mát nhà và làm thức ăn trong vườn.
So we use grid, the metal grid. So with this, they can plant some vines, so can be cool in the space. And the size of this is 2 meter high and 10 meter long.
Lũ trẻ có thể chơi và quan sát hoạt động của con gà, và cho đến khi con gà nó đi ngủ vào chiều tối.
So this could be like small playground for the kids, but also they can observe the activity of the animal during the day, from the daytime till the time that they go to sleep. And as you can see, that in chicken, when they go to sleep, they find a higher place, but they may not see it if they are in the city. So yeah, we can help them to observe those activities.
Chúng tôi tiếp tục giới thiệu đến các bạn một công trình, nó không phải là cho nhà ở, nó là một cái studio cho một nghệ nhân.
So we've been working for housing a lot in Vietnam to figure it out the problem that the Vietnamese people facing with their houses when they come to the season what they want for their house. But we also want to do something else, and we would like to introduce you about another project. It is not a living space, but a working space, a studio in the middle of Vietnam.
Công trình nằm ở trung tâm của miền Trung Việt Nam. Nó nằm dọc cạnh con sông Thu Bồn, nơi có rất nhiều làng nghề và ngành gốm là một cái nghề truyền thống ở khu vực này.
So this project sitting on the next to the Thu Bồn River, and here they have a lot of traditional craft village, and the pottery is one of them.
Ngày nay nhiều cái người trẻ trong các làng nghề rời làng đến thành phố và tìm những công việc mới.
So nowadays in those villages, the young people, they tend to leave the countryside to go to city to work. So so we want to do something for the people who stay.
Người nghệ nhân muốn giữ gìn, và chúng tôi cũng muốn làm một cái điều gì đó trong ấy về cái nghề gốm này.
So there are people who stay. We really want to do something for them to help them to maintain and also inspire other people to continue the work.
Chúng tôi bắt đầu từ cái bàn xoay làm gốm tại trung tâm của công trình.
So with this project, we start with the throwing wheel and the turning table in the middle of in the center of the project.
Chúng tôi lấy ánh sáng từ trung tâm của công trình, từ trên xuống dưới qua cái khoảng thông tầng của cái tầng lửng.
The natural light is floating from an atrium to the central location where the wheel was located.
Người nghệ nhân làm việc tại trung tâm của công trình, nơi các bàn xoay gốm, ranh giới giữa ánh sáng và bóng đổ, nơi em đấy có thể là trò chuyện với chính mình, trò chuyện với cái tác phẩm.
So the artist will work in the center of the project, and then the place that he worked would be the boundary between the light and the shadow. So he may move around the table. But this is where he can find the conversation between him and himself and about his work at the same time.
Cái tầng lửng công trình là nơi chúng tôi đặt cái kệ gốm. Hàng năm vào mùa nước lên thì nơi đây bị ngập lụt, cho nên nơi đây là để bảo vệ các sản phẩm của ông ấy.
So different from the south of Vietnam, where we have to face with the heat. Here in the central, we have stormy season every year. So in this area, every year they have the flood is rise up to 1 or 2 meter in this area. So for this project, on the mezzanine of the project, we have the shelf system, so they can store and display the work of the artist.
Chúng tôi muốn tạo một cái hệ khung để gốm, nơi mọi người có thể đi lên tham quan, quan sát được người nghệ nhân làm gốm, hòa mình vào trong đó và có thể nhìn thấy cái cảnh quan xung quanh của khu vườn.
So we use the wood frame to connect the viewer with the artist, with his work and the outside environment, and the viewer can be also a part of it.
Chúng tôi muốn tạo một cái công trình nó giống như có một cái lớp vỏ là xốp rỗng để người nghệ nhân làm việc trong đó bằng cảm giác được cái môi trường bên ngoài, như là về ánh sáng, về âm thanh, tiếng gió và cảm nhận được cái hơi nước.
So with this project, we have a shelf of the project is very porous. So the artists, when they work inside the project, they can still feel the nature. They can see the nature. They can hear the sound from the river, from the trees, from the garden.
Phía ngoài của công trình là một cái hàng rào tre để phơi gốm. Nó được sử dụng tre từ khu vườn lân cận. Nó là một cái ranh giới ước lệ giữa công trình và khu vườn xung quanh.
So the outermost layer is the frame, the bamboo frame that we use in the garden to drive the terracotta, and this is also a subjective boundary between the buildings and the garden.
Chúng tôi quan niệm rằng công trình giống như là một khối đất sét được kéo lên từ lòng đất.
And we think this project is like you can imagine like a raw material, a raw clay that you take from the river and put on the floor, and it would be the initiative of the creative work. And we would like to show you in video briefly, and it will also lead to the end of our presentation. Have a look.
xin cảm ơn.
Thank you very much.
So I want to thank you for the great presentations, and I want to jump right into a kind of observation, but also a question that's on my mind. I mean, I'll start by describing, I think, some commonality in the work that we've just seen, which is that it's beautiful and graceful and often subtle work that involves inspiring use of materials, of light, of indoor and outdoor space, of relation to nature and non-human life. And I wonder if at first glance it might be at odds with something like the urgency and the scale of climate change. I mean, if we think of this version of sustainability where we have 11 years, according to the UN IPCC, you know, to drastically reduce carbon, change a lot of things about human society and architecture, or we will trigger this irreversible catastrophe, right? So that's the kind of language and the problem statement of huge scale. And maybe at first glance, it might suggest that it's at odds with subtlety and slowness and small design moves. I think in relation to that, this connects to something we've been thinking about, you know, in this room and at this school, which we've been describing as climate change at the building scale. You know, because if climate change is this global thing and it involves like careful calculation of, you know, the parts per million of carbon, what could a building possibly do? So that's a little bit on my mind, seeing this work and these versions of sustainability, really kind of thoughtful approaches to sustainability in architecture. And so with that as a kind of a context, I wanted to ask for your reflections about two kind of concepts that have been on my mind recently in this kind of realm. And the first is a concept advanced by Paola Antonelli, a curator at the Museum of Modern Art and also the curator of the recent Milan Triennial, entitled Broken Nature. And Paola says, somewhat provocatively, even to those who believe that the human species is inevitably going to become extinct in the future, design presents the means to plan a more elegant ending. It can ensure that the next dominant species will remember us with a modicum of respect as dignified and caring, if not intelligent beings. So I wanted to test out these two concepts on you. The first one is this idea that, you know, design is this, you know, maybe we could say this thing that is human, that involves, you know, in the face of struggle, suffering, potentially extinction, design is this possibility for some amount of grace or elegance. So I wanted to open that up to each of you to just, you know, talk about whether that resonates with you, whether you have a different version of design, whether your design relates and how it relates to this, you know, huge scale of the problem at hand.
Yeah, but it was good saying that I mean, the pragmatic, for us at least, it's not enough. It's but we need to ensure that it's to be able to make some kind of platform for activity and for people to become, you know, make them responsible themselves, or to include people. That's one central thing for us, at least, and that's concerning both the user, but also working with projects. We really like to involve people, everyone's skills, and as much as possible to make them a part of this process. So I would say that yes, it's not enough to just make something, but we need to make people involved.
Yeah.
It's always really difficult to change the whole world with one building to start with. So, even if you want it as an architect, you have to do it with clients, and that's also another kind of challenge. So, how I understand architecture and what I see also in your work is that with very little steps, tiny steps, you try to change the situation. I think making a kind of a building that, I mean, if you really don't want to hurt the earth, don't build, basically, right? Then we should just stop doing it at all. But then when you make something, then make something with a lot of care, and that people really appreciate it, and that it stays for a long time, and people can use it in many different ways. And then if you have the opportunity to use materials that are very conscious and they don't put a lot of pressure on the environment. At the moment, we're researching for another project, for example, to build everything in wood and to really take care of having low CO2 levels on the overall production of the entire project. But it really requires a specific client to do so. And then for me, it's clear, and I think the ambition that you can have with one architecture project is maybe very limited. So I think Juan Herrera's already mentioned that I'm involved in some research with a bigger group of people that is called Future Urban Regions, and it's on the academic level, and we teach students in many studios all over Holland how they can improve the development of cities. But it's on a very, very, very abstract level that when you get there, you can achieve really, really a lot. But you have to really take with you such a big group of people to make it work. So you have a bigger scope or a bigger group of people you can involve, but it also takes much longer time to get it done. So perhaps one answer could be to your question, maybe architecture can address a small part of it, and you can address it on other levels as well in a parallel kind of universe. But,
yeah.
Chúng tôi nghĩ rằng là cái sự tồn tại của công trình cũng như là tương lai của nó thì con người không thể hạn chế nó được, mà nó sẽ tồn tại, và cái sự thay đổi của môi trường cũng như là con người tương tác với môi trường thì cần quan trọng là vấn đề là công trình tồn tại có sự chia sẻ và giới hạn cái vai trò của công trình cũng như vai trò người thiết kế như thế nào với công trình để cùng song song và tự cân bằng.
So we think that it is unavoidable to build things now, even though the climate change. So come to a project in the context of the global warming and climate change, the existence of the project itself and how it interact with the present and the future is the architect position, purpose, and goal that we need to do and to work on, and how the project itself share with the environment and how they interact, how they communicate. So it is unavoidable, but it could be something that architect that we trying to do and working on.
Yeah, I mean, something I'm hearing from all of you in different ways is the way that buildings are actually linked and interconnected with many other things, with people and participation, with other strategies at different scales, with materials. And certainly I think there's a growing awareness that when we design buildings, we can think about designing their connectedness to other systems. I want to quickly, and I'm about to open this up to the audience, so audience, you can get your questions ready. But I want to quickly ask for your reflections on one other kind of concept and idea that's been on my mind in this realm, basically sustainability and architecture. And this is a quote from a writer named Jody Dean, and she's thinking about the combination of sustainability and basically social justice. And she says that just as class politics without ecology can support extractivism, so can ecology without class struggle continue the assault on working people. And she terms that, this kind of ecology without a social awareness, perhaps green neoliberalism. So I wonder if you have thoughts about that in your own work, or just in your thinking about something like climate change at the building scale, about the current state of our discipline as it relates to, this thing that's on everyone's mind increasingly, and everyone would of course say, yes, we're addressing sustainability. It's important to address sustainability. But do you see that as a kind of tension? Is it something that has come up in your own work, that there's, sustainability on the one hand and social equality on the other, and there can sometimes be a tension between those, and we see that a little bit playing out in a non-architectural realm, but for example in the Yellow Vest protests in France, where a carbon tax, presumably very good for sustainability and climate change, has provoked a reaction against some of the people who are going to be maybe disproportionately affected by it. And the sustainability strategy backfires because there's not enough acknowledgement of the social issues. So we certainly see a level of intense human scale in all the projects we've seen so far, concern for the people living in the spaces, a kind of inclusivity. But I wonder if it crosses your work as well, these bigger issues of equality.
Can I say something? Yeah, we actually just had elections for the Senate and the province 1.5 weeks ago, and a totally new right-wing party won glamorously with a major majority, and they are actually exactly doing this, playing into the sentiment of these people that feel that they have to pay for climate change. Where 1 year ago the Green Party and the left parties were really in front of all the polls, suddenly in a few weeks' time it completely changed. And the guy that is now leading the country on the level of the province or the state and in the Senate, he says the climate change is a hoax, like Mr. Trump here. And many others. So there's definitely a super big political component in it. I'm really of the opinion, like Holland is a very regulated country. We're very similar to countries like Germany, Austria, Switzerland, where I think France also in a certain way, where there's a very strong regulation from the government on certain levels. And I think it's most successful to make big steps in climate change. If they really want to achieve something in a short period of time, I think the government needs to act, because I think architects alone cannot make that change. The only thing we can do is show that you don't have to be afraid to make sustainability something important. You can still make a really beautiful society in many ways, beautiful designs. We are designers in the end, to make the best out of the situation, but I think we cannot make the rules, and we cannot alone convince clients to go all the way to achieve some level of success.
Any other?
tôi nghĩ mọi cái tồn tại nếu đều có cái sự mâu thuẫn cũng như là cái sự hỗ tương qua lại thì không thể được tất cả mọi thứ được. Thì chúng tôi nghĩ rằng là khi mà làm một công trình thì khả năng về tài chính, khả năng về vật liệu mà nó phù hợp với bối cảnh, mà hạn chế hạn chế cái sự tác động đến cái môi trường xung quanh mình về cái cách ở, cách sử dụng thiết bị và cách sử dụng vật liệu, thì tôi nghĩ là chỉ hướng đến cái sự là biết giới hạn về cái việc đủ trong việc sử dụng là cái điều tôi nghĩ đến.
So with this question, I'm not sure that I can get it correctly or not, but we think like everything existing and all the project that on the buildings that we could make, they also create the contraction, but also like supportive with each other. So about the sustainability and the social qualification, in our project and the way that we do, so we basically a lot about practicing in Vietnam. So we learn by going with the different projects. So to us, on different client that they come, they have different budget, they have different brief that come to us. So with that, what we can do is using the context that we have, and then the budget that the customer have, and what we are doing and our philosophy. So we try to build the house with the place, with the brief of the client, but also try to limit the impact on the environment, on our ecology system. And by the use of the material and the use of the electricity device that you're gonna use in the house or in the space. So we have to think all about that and try to balance though by the choice and the conversation with the clients. So it's hard to persuade them, but we can help them to understand what we can do, not only as an architect, but also with the client, so they can do what they can do with that.
But I'm a little bit into same thing, that I mean we are interested in the theories and everything, but we always try to go back a little bit in get this kind of feeling of common sense, what is really needed in this situation, and that also relates this question of sustainability and life and people and society. And that's one thing that we always do when we work, to involve everyone in this kind of process, to really also think about those questions. I mean, what is happening if we put this closed part here, with not only with the building and the economy, but also with the relation to the context and everything. So I would say it's that's maybe our ambition at the moment, to go back to basic a little bit and talk in a language that everyone understand, and make them comfortable to be active, and to become to encourage them to be a part of this kind of change.
I think we'll open it up for questions now, but just one quick observation. I mean, it's interesting for me to hear each of you in your own way talk about the client and the brief, because one way of looking at your work is that each of you in your own way has kind of magically transcended the requirements from the outside, and seems to be working in a really fluid way with your own agency and ideas, and I think that's a tribute to each of your kind of creativity. Let's see, I think we probably only have a few minutes, but maybe time for one or two questions, if there are any questions from the audience.
Just going back to your earlier statement around having only 11 years to act, do you think that, I guess throw it to the panel, do you think that architects are best placed to be making buildings or be using our organisational skills and spatial kind of networking and thinking in that regard to better align ourselves to a future where we might have a bigger impact?
I think both, but I think my answer is very related to my own context, because in the Netherlands it's very often said at the moment architects should not be designers at all. That period is past. We should not do that. We should just only organize processes. And I'm actually very much against that as well. So I think it is very good to show what you can do with a good design, but I think it's also very good to be active, to take an active role in the discussion. But I'm not sure if that is always possible on every project. For me, it works sometimes better to take a different role in different situations and discussions. But I guess it's every context creates different opportunities for each architect. So I'm very speaking from my personal situation in the Netherlands at the moment.
Yeah, it's very hard when we're trained to design and make buildings and make architecture, and to, I guess, come at it at a level where you're not actually doing that. So I think I agree with the both scenario there.
Question over here.
Hi. My name is John, and I'm a practicing architect here for about 25 years. And I have a question for all of you. You spoke a little bit about brief and your customers, and you mentioned a contractor you had to work with who did block work only. But we all have to work with the building departments, the authorities who make the regulations and things, whether it's landmarks or other agencies. Can you speak about resistance you find in the agencies because they don't know how to do something differently, whether it's institutional or it's code related or it's industry has their ear and they control what the authorities believe, things like that?
Yeah, I'm always talking about the including parts, but that's really important also for the authorities. We don't like, projects to become or to present projects that are finished. We never do that. We present it like pieces, more or less, that is completely open for discussion for the client, for the builder, for the city, for instance. I mean, we have hundreds of regulations and opinions in Stockholm as well, or in Sweden. But so we really like this thing to bring some components to the table and create this together, and that also makes everyone kind of responsible, or they take responsibility for the process. So we never come with a proposal like this is it. It's because that's partly because we like to include everyone, but partly because we don't think we have the answer. I mean, we have tools to create an answer, but we cannot create the answer ourselves.
I wanted to just ask for a really brief final statement from each of you, because I'm thinking about it, and it's I think it's really interesting and important to remember that in each case you're a relatively young practice, but we can already sense this kind of momentum building and this acceleration in the projects you're doing, in the work. And I wonder if you think ahead a few years or maybe 10 years, do you imagine kind of channeling this momentum to do larger projects or increase the size of the office, or maybe expand the scope of what you're working on? Some of the things like you're talking about being involved in a bigger consortium and doing research and possibly education as well. So, as you're kind of pushing forward, what is like, even just like one thing on your mind about what you're going to be kind of adding to the mix for yourself?
Maybe I can connect to that question that you were talking about. I mean, the kind of the part that decides how things will be made. I think that part is really interesting, because it's often in Sweden you get a fixed plan, and you should do something here. You should do your own thing, but within this thing. And I think the step before that's the really interesting part. And something that we talk a lot about also, how to kind of be able to be involved in the more early processes, and how to make systems more freely for people to develop.
Tôi thì có suy nghĩ rằng tôi thay đổi liên tục về cái suy nghĩ của mình, cho nên là 10 năm thì nó xa quá. Tôi chỉ nghĩ ngắn là trong vòng ngày mai thôi, hay là trong năm nay thôi, tôi sẽ làm những cái công trình nó tốt hơn những cái tôi đã từng làm qua.
He said that his mind changing every single day. Like, how can he know what he wants like 10 years? So that today he just want, tomorrow he do a better thing than today and continue work. But for 10 years, really hard to say in the long future. So.
It would be nice to do certain type of projects that allows you, or that gives you a bigger voice in a kind of more general discussions in my country or in my context. That would be really nice, and to continue doing nice work, but also to, I don't know, like say something about how to make better cities, or I don't know how much you can achieve with architecture alone, but it would be nice to become a bit bigger. And and then, I like inventions. I like making glass buildings with no structure. Making the tallest wooden tower or something like that, to show what architecture can do. I think that is nice.
We would like to ask a little bit. For his answer, we think we want to change a little bit in the short term, because you can see the climate change, the environment change every single year. Every single day we see the change. So we want to create the small impact, small change every day, and through every project that we're working on. So we hope that in continuously doing that in the 10 years, we may find something different for Vietnam and the world in the architecture generally.
Can I ask?
Yes,
also, sorry.
last word.
Because I think you have an extremely beautiful country. With very nice work being realized, I don't know, the last 10, 20 years. It's interesting also very much what you're doing. But is there also a kind of a level of kind of more on a national level, some kind of planning directive, or is each architect working independently, or are you also more together forming an agenda for Vietnam? I mean, in relation to your worries for climate change.
He said that in Vietnam we are a developing country, so the country is developed very significantly in the last few years. So they have some advantage and disadvantage about that, but because the change, the plan is not follow the speed of the developed. So it's hard to working on that at this time, but maybe in the future when it's more steady, it's more predictable, so it could be easier.
Okay, I think with that we'll wrap up. Thank you again for the presentation.